Well, hello again. It's another edition of Something to Talk About. And she's still Vaughn.
He's still Stuart.
And we have sad news. Today's Friday the 13th. And unfortunately, this is the very, very last Something to Talk About show on Fridays. Aha, gotcha. This is our last Friday show because starting next week, we're moving to Hump Day, Wednesdays, 11 a.m. right here at KVGI Media. So mark it on your calendar. If you've had us on Fridays, move us up a couple of days because we're going to start being on Wednesday every week at 11 o'clock, KVGI Radio, and then again on YouTube and all these multi-platforms that we are all over the world. But we're kind of excited. We're going to be moving up to Wednesdays, and it'll make it a lot easier for KVGI Media. It'll make it easier for Vaughn and Stuart and everybody concerned.
It'll be fun.
Yep.
That'll be fun. That'll be a fun day.
Yep. Going to be on Hump Day now. So
fun day on Hump Day.
Yeah, and what we're going to continue to do with the show is occasionally Vaughn and I are going to just be talking whatever comes off the top of our heads, like cats or dogs, whatever passes across our screen. But what we're going to do is we want to reach out to the community and get the community involved in issues that are of interest to all of us. And Lord knows there's plenty to choose from. So what we want to do is to try and bring people in that are more knowledgeable than both of us on particular subjects. And that's exactly what we're doing this morning. Because Vaughn said, we probably should talk a little bit about mental health. There's certainly a lot of aspects to talk about with mental health. And Vaughn, you reached out to a connection in Denton at the Denton MHMR clinic, and we want to welcome Lauren into the show. Lauren Titsworth is with the Denton MHMR clinic.
Yes.
And the first question, of course, that I asked was, what does MHMR stand for? And you go ahead and tell the audience, because we're kind of trying to be politically correct these days. But the name is.
So MHMR is kind of like an older terminology. Basically, we're kind of moving more towards a more positive language. So MH stands for mental health, and then the MR side focuses more on intellectual and developmental disabilities now. But we've kept the name thus far.
Yeah, I mean, because then you got to change the logo and the stationery and all of that kind of stuff. But we are living in a society right now where the term mental health has taken on so many aspects. We've heard time and time again when there have been issues in schools and theaters with active shooters and everything, they look back and they say, well, he was mentally unstable. Why didn't he get some help, he or she, whoever the shooter was? And there was always that mental health aspect that maybe was overlooked. We certainly see what the pandemic has done to an awful lot of people. It's increased their anxiety and the tension and stress that they're going through. And also, how has this impacted what you and your organization are doing with mental health?
So to kind of touch on your first point about the active shooter side, is from research, we know that people that are living with mental health are actually more likely to be victims of violence rather than perpetrators of violence. But at the same time, kind of moving to your second side of that, COVID has very quickly and very much changed how we give mental health services to the community. I mean, clearly we can't be face-to-face right now due to concerns of COVID. So we, as an organization, I didn't know, as a counseling community all around had to quickly transition to a tele-mental health perspective. We had to learn very quickly how to still connect with people and have that communication process, but at the same time, try our best to be safe. So, I mean, COVID, you've probably seen the numbers. I mean, the CDC has said over and over again, there's increases in mental health, suicidality, substance use, I mean, across the board. I think one research study they did in June actually said 40% increase. So, I mean, that can definitely be something that's going to have a lasting effect for a while as we move forward.
And why, being a professional in that industry, why do you think, I mean, there are some obvious reasons, I guess. People are shut in, they're feeling lonely, they're not able to interact with other people.
Yeah.
So there are some obvious reasons, but then do you think that it's just people who already maybe had tendencies that just really surfaced during this time just because everybody's anxiety is much higher, depression and whatnot? I mean, what can you at all pinpoint why you think that the numbers rose so high during this time? I mean, I know it's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people who are not affected by what's going on right now in the world. So why are some so greatly affected and others not? Is it a chemical thing? Is it a personality thing? I mean, when you see these people and treat these people and get to know these people that come to you, are you able to identify what triggers it?
So I can't say there's one thing that I can pinpoint because everybody's experience is different. Everybody's situation at home is different. So it's kind of just an accumulation of, you mentioned the isolation. The biggest thing with mental health treatment is being able to connect. So whether that's connecting to providers, whether that's connecting to peer support groups, that level of connection, as quickly as we moved with COVID, I mean, people weren't prepared necessarily to continue those connections. And when we talk about addiction specifically, so often people say that the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connecting to other people. And we've seen these rates increase probably because of that lack of connection. Support groups had to shut down for a while. They were moving virtual as best they could. But at the same time, people didn't have those same strong connections that they had pre-COVID.
Right.
So I think, in my personal opinion, I think that's a big piece.
Right.
But like I said, there's so many other pieces to it that we may not necessarily know or see. But outside of everything, we see the numbers going up. We see people reporting more mental health symptoms. But at the same time, as COVID changes the landscape of mental health, we really need to be looking at preparing for more people to need treatment.
Right. And the one thing, in my opinion, and I don't know this to be, true, but we are talking more about mental health issues right now. It's almost like the pandemic kind of triggered the conversation. And mental health has always had this kind of stigma. You don't want to ever tell anybody you're in therapy. You don't want to ever tell anybody you're seeing a counselor or a therapist, because I don't know, it's like a sign of weakness or something. I don't know. But the good thing about it is that many people are becoming very aware of what a big issue mental health, illness is in our world. And maybe the good thing that will come out of this is that people won't be so intimidated by talking about it. And people who possibly need help and who have been kind of just secretive about it and just keeping it all in will go and seek out help. Do you see that maybe to be true?
That honestly is my hope. I mean, the thing about COVID is it really has given us a chance to review how we approach mental health, how we have conversations about it, the language that we use to discuss it. So as much as COVID isn't fun, I really hope that this really starts to open the opportunity for people to feel more comfortable discussing mental health. That's the thing I'm a huge advocate for, is having conversations and using very supportive language.
Lauren,
Right.
I'm curious. COVID has forced a lot of people to spend a lot more time at home and not getting out. That can lead to depression because we are sequestered and all. Is depression a form of mental illness or mental health concern?
So people can experience depressive symptoms, but not necessarily meet the clinical diagnosis for depression. So there's a few options when it comes to this range of depression and it comes to the clinical criteria. But like I said, people can still experience some of those symptoms, but still not meet the time frame criteria to actually qualify for a diagnosis. And that can be for really any diagnosis per se. So depression, anxiety, things like that.
Because I'm just seeing that because people are not getting out. Yeah, okay. Now we all thought that Zooming and everything and virtual connecting was the greatest thing 6-7 months ago, but
Yeah.
we didn't think we were still going to be doing it 8 months later. And
No.
it's to the point where people are saying, I've had it with this. I'm not going to stay in the house anymore. I got to get out of here. And so it's kind of rattled the cages a little bit. What do we as individuals, how do we look at our friends and our family and try to recognize if there are any signs of depression or maybe somebody is getting a little bit too depressed and maybe having a mental issue?
Yeah, so some of the biggest signs to look out for are changes in behavior both quickly and over a period of time. So if we're speaking about depression specifically, people may lose interest in activities that they used to enjoy. They may withdraw more from other people. They may sleep more, changes in appetite, weight changes. So my biggest thing when people notice these symptoms, either in their friends or family members, I always encourage them, reach out, express like, hey, I've really seen like these changes in you and it makes me a little concerned. But then also kind of turning around on that and being there to support them, helping them get connected to resources, mental health wise, if that's something that they're open to.
Are you seeing that there's any kind of a spike in alcohol or drug use during this time now?
Specifically in Denton County, I can't speak on the numbers per se, but nationally, I mean, there's been multiple studies on different levels of age groups. I just read a study recently about elderly population that's seeing a rise in substance use, specifically with anti-anxiety medications. And I mean, just based on the CDC report that I mentioned earlier, more and more people are reporting substance use. I believe it was about 13% of the sample that they talked to had reported either recently starting using substances again or increased use during COVID. So
would that include, pardon me, alcohol?
Yes. So substance use includes alcohol. Yeah.
I mean, just the numbers alone, like when Total Wines or whatever, their alcohol sales are through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people were locked in and I guess figured let's just have a drink. I don't know.
Yeah, but it's also made coping so hard.
You don't have to leave your house to go get the alcohol and wine either, because you can just call up and they'll deliver it.
Right. Yeah.
The thing is, coping, for some people, substance use can become a coping skill. It's not a healthy coping skill per se, but it can become a way to cope. So that in turn can then turn into possible substance use concerns. But if we don't have those effective coping skills, then that can definitely lead us down the more unhealthy path.
Right.
Is it fair to say that what we can do as individuals certainly is, if there are people that are in seclusion and that are lonely, stay in touch with them, pick up the phone and call them.
Absolutely.
Or say, hey, listen, I'm going to send you a link and join me on Zoom and let's have a conversation so I can see that you're doing okay too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I even do that myself with my own friends. I mean, even mental health professionals kind of have felt this level of isolation. I mean, everybody, I would say, has. I mean, COVID changed the world. But at the same time, yeah, just continue to reach out, continue to offer support, continue to be that non-judgmental ear that people need, because sometimes people just need to be heard. They need someone there that's supportive, that will just listen to their experience and their story. But on the connection piece, yeah, just invite them to a Zoom chat. It's so easy to just send a link, and then you have that face-to-face connection. Is it like real face-to-face? No, but it's the safest option right now. And we got to work with what we have.
It's a better alternative to nothing.
Exactly.
So let's kind of think about reality here. There are a lot of people out there that just don't want to admit that they have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are probably, I would venture to say, thousands of how do you promote your organization? How do you put yourself out there? Because you've got to put yourself in front of those people, because they're not going to put themselves in front of you. Mm-hmm. How do you find them? How do you, because I just picture these people that are isolated, not admitting, not talking, say somebody sees signs and reaches out to them, but they're in denial. Mm-hmm. How do you get those people to want to get help?
So, of course, I got into the mental health field hoping I could help everyone. And I learned very quickly that's not always going to be the case, unfortunately. So what I do is I try my best to listen to people's experiences. Like I just mentioned a second ago, if people are willing to talk to me and willing to let me hear them out, then I absolutely want to give them the floor so that we can do that. At the same time, there's situations like you mentioned where people may not be as open, and they may never come into my office. So in those situations, I like to look at their family system. How can the system around them continue to encourage treatment? How can the system around them help connect them to the resources and let them know that they're available, even if that maybe right now that's not something you want to do? Continuing to express concern, continuing to point things out, but still being that non-judgmental attitude, and still approaching it from a place of wanting to create hope and help. But I mean, it can definitely be hard, especially when someone maybe doesn't feel that they need mental health treatment at that time.
And don't you think also, like, how can we make the conversation, just generally speaking, in the general public, not so taboo, not so, we don't want to hear about mental health issues. That's a scary thing. And we don't want to talk about it. And I'm not going to admit that I know somebody who's seeing a therapist. And, how do we, like, some people get it. Like, I know a couple people who actually don't have any real mental health issues, but they it's almost like a well visit when you used to see a pediatrician, you'd have a well visit. You were not sick, but you would just go in and get checked. I know people who go on a regular basis just to kind of talk about their life and their thing going themselves and whatever. Yeah. And it's just kind of they find it to be kind of like a healthy, like massaging the brain kind of thing, just
exactly.
So there are people like that who totally love it and have no problem with it. But how do we make the conversation? How do you promote yourselves as an organization as a positive place? I mean, you know what I mean? Don't you want to kind of put out that reputation of Denton County MHMR is a positive place? I mean, you're dealing with negative issues, but it's a positive place. Sorry, my computer's doing something.
You're good.
Do you understand kind of how do we make the subject more positive and not a scary topic?
So this is kind of like a multi-layered question. So just to kind of start it, for so long, mental health has gotten that kind of bad rap. We talk about maybe the crazy person or the person that's suffering with mental health. But at the end of the day, there's people living with mental health. There are people that are thriving.
And there's varying degrees of it too.
Yeah. But the thing is, we really have to change our own conversations, the way that we talk about it. When I was in school, They talked all the time about what we call person first language. So the disability isn't the person is living with the disability. And I saw a cartoon a long time ago. It's like, if we treated medical issues like we treat mental health issues, and there was a cartoon of a guy that had gotten his arm cut off in an accident. It was a cartoon, of course. And they said, oh, just suck it up, get over it. But the thing is, mental health is health. So we as a community, we need to start shifting this conversation to focusing more on being accepting of it, talking about it, and kind of moving away from that taboo. Of course, it's going to take time. We have made progress, absolutely, but it's still going to continue to be an issue and something that we need to move forward in. Mental health, it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care if you're black, white, rich, poor. It does not care. But I mean, I've seen over and over again communities, they're like, oh, that's not our problem. That we don't have that in our community. Well, no, you do. You don't see it because people feel this sense of shame if they talk about it. But the thing is, we need to talk about it so we can help people, so we can get them connected with support, so that we can have those people around.
That's
over the years, I think that there have been people that have had problems with alcohol or drugs, and very often they say is before an alcoholic or a drug abuser can get help, they have to admit that they have a problem, and then reach out and say, "Okay, I need help," and then seek the help.
Mm-hmm.
In certain aspects, is this true for people that may, do people really recognize that they have a mental health problem? Because obviously with drugs and alcohol, there is a physical aspect to their problem, but mental health, it's all up in here. Do people sometimes put themselves in the same position, or do you have to rely on somebody outside that says, he or she is just not acting the way they should, and I think maybe they have a problem, and talk to them first and say, why don't you seek some help? And here's a phone number. Call Lauren, and maybe she can help you.
So there's not one right answer to this question.
Yeah.
So if someone is experiencing mental health symptoms or experiencing substance use symptoms, it's important to talk to them about it for sure. But there's no one right way to go about it. You mentioned admitting that someone has a problem. That isn't necessarily always necessary for someone to seek treatment. Sometimes people can, like friends or family, can point out, like I mentioned earlier, kind of some of the signs they're seeing and express that concern. But if people, in school, we talk about theory of change. If in my theory of change when it comes to counseling, if there's change in one part of the system, it can affect the rest of the system. So if we can start to look at how we can change that one part, then we can affect the whole system. Is it foolproof? No. Is it possible? Absolutely. So just starting that conversation, being open, being empathetic, active listening, non-judgmental, all those things, so that we can start to guide people towards hope, help, and support.
So hope, help, and support.
Mm-hmm.
What is your goal with when you start seeing somebody are they considered a patient?
Depends on the person they're working with. A lot of clinicians look at this kind of level of clientele differently. One of our departments kind of coined this phrase that I had heard for the first time. They call them prosumers, which is more of a positive language.
Yeah.
So I see that as awesome, because that's really changing the conversation internally of how we look at people that come to treatment.
And it's outpatient, everybody, right? It's not.
Yeah. So we're an outpatient mental health clinic. We're the local mental health authority for Denton County.
And if a case is serious enough, then I would, I guess you have to recommend that they go inpatient somewhere.
Yeah. So if someone is a risk of harm to themselves or others, then we have a crisis team available 24/7 that can do an assessment to make a recommendation for treatment. But anytime we do one of those assessments, we focus on what we call least restrictive environment. So we're looking at their support system. We're looking at the people that they have behind them that may be able to play a role in this crisis. We do safety plans. We kind of look at what's most appropriate. So we don't take hospitalization lightly.
Okay.
But if it is needed, it can be an option.
Is it ever a goal, a realistic goal, to say you're working with somebody? Would the goal ever be to not have to see that person anymore, or is that something that you never, like, is mental health, even though you're dealing with it better and you're functioning better and you're not feeling maybe the anxiety anymore or whatever, is it kind of like an alcoholic where you, even though you're not doing it anymore, you still are, an alcoholic? Or like, will you always have the mental health under there? And so do you always want to continue working with that person, just even after they get better?
Yeah. So especially when we're working with people, we are always following up. We're always checking in to see how they are, because like you mentioned, mental health, it can change in severity. Someone can start maybe very higher mental health needs, and then as they do treatment and counseling and maybe medication management, it gets lower. So in some of those instances, we can look at, like, we don't call them necessarily aftercare options, but in the therapy world, kind of reducing the number and frequency of times you're meeting with someone. But at the same time, for me as a clinician, like counselor specifically, I always think it's important to continue to follow up with people, even after they leave your therapy room or your organization. So then that way we can continue to reach out for them, remind them if something does come up, or if the mental health symptoms return or become exacerbated, we're absolutely here and we're still there to support you.
Okay, so the goal is, though, to get them to actually kind of graduate from your program.
So mental health varies for every single person. There's no graduation point per se. Has the person learned effective coping skills? Have they learned effective problem solving skills? Do they have connections to support systems that can help carry them? Some people stay in mental health services forever, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
Some people stay in counseling forever, and I think that's great.
Yep.
But the thing is, mental health, substance use, just like medical things, are lifelong events, and they can be. Just like diabetes, mental health can be better managed maybe at one point in time, but later down the road, something may have changed and it can be completely different.
Right.
So if we look at that from that medical mental health perspective and kind of compare it, it's a little easier to understand sometimes for people.
Lauren, one thing that I can share with you and with the audience is I'm a Vietnam veteran, and a lot of my fellow veterans and all, it was our generation that coined the term post-traumatic stress. And then they added the word disorder to the end of it. But that's another form, in my mind, of kind of mental health, because, once you have post-traumatic stress, you always have post-traumatic stress. I have a mild form of it. If my wife drops something on the floor in the kitchen, I react.
Yeah.
I jump. And it's something that I will live with for the rest of my life. And so, to your point, what you're saying is, once you have something like that, it isn't something that you cure and then it goes away. You just have to deal with it, whether it's with medication or whether it's with active mental training. So, are you also, again, I keep going back to the pandemic, but are you starting to see an increase in this? Basically a post-traumatic stress that people are going through because they're being sequestered and because they can't go freely?
I mean, I can't say per se if there's been an increase, because I haven't personally done any sort of research in it, but I can say that just based on some people that I've worked with, they've definitely reported that isolation piece of COVID has definitely affected their ability to reach out, has affected their ability to effectively manage some of their mental health symptoms. But at the same time, some people, their biggest coping skill is other people and staying connected. And the second that kind of pretty much got ripped away, people didn't always know how to cope with that. So that's what I would say to that part.
Vaughn and I very much appreciate this conversation that you're sharing with us this morning. Is this something that you and your clinic offer, perhaps as a program that you can go to other groups via Zoom or whatever in order to do some instructional programming? on the signs of mental health or mental illness and what to look for, what to recognize. Are those things available to the general public or to church groups, social groups, whatever?
So for me, outside of work, I talk to groups all the time. I'm studying to get my PhD in family therapy, so I'm constantly doing presentations to organizations, educating adolescents on things. So it's not necessarily something that I do for the organization. It's something that I do personally, but professionally.
It's your
sometimes.
life.
Yes. I mean, it is. I want to be able to have this conversation with people to break down that stigma so that we can create a more supportive culture in our world so that we can support people that need help. At the same time, MHMR specifically, we do offer what we call gatekeeper trainings. Right now, we're offering them mostly to community organizations. We can maybe look forward in the future if there's any interest about offering them to the community. But basically, the gatekeeper trainings kind of teach people what the risk factors are, the warning signs of possible mental health or suicidality, and then how to react in those situations, not as a clinician, but as a community member, as a gatekeeper. So having that honest conversation, asking about risk, and then getting them connected with resources and how to do that.
Well, for those that are watching and listening to the program, the information is right on the screen there. And if you have concerns and questions, call Lauren or go online to see what the programs are that they offer. It's extremely important. And I just my eyes are always open.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm talking to people and friends, I think it's again that quotation of see something, say something. If somebody is just not acting their normal self, just don't just blow it off. Maybe look to see if there's something a little more inward that you need to draw out of them in order to help them feel better.
I really find the role of, did you say gatekeeper?
Yeah.
That's really great, because what I like about what you said some things that are interesting, like, looking at the whole system, looking at the family network, bringing the community together, not only in an effort to get us to better understand the issue, but also become more comfortable talking about it. But you've gone even beyond that to getting, training the community on how to identify those who might be in need, and how to actually, as a community member, support that person. Like you said, not clinically, but just as just another human being living on this planet all together. How can we come together not only to recognize, but what's we can actually be effective? And what you're saying is you're training community members. You're giving them the skills necessary, not professionally or clinically, like you said, but just giving them skills as just another human being in how to identify and support these individuals. And I think that's amazing.
It's
organization is. I hope that there are so many other organizations out there that do something like what you just described.
Yeah, I know that there's organizations throughout our area that are offering kind of these mental health trainings, so that way our community can be better equipped to respond in a situation. I mean, I've heard stories time and time again where someone learned about maybe their loved one or friend or family member expressing thoughts of maybe killing themselves, and the person just had no idea what to do. So that's kind of where we want this training and the trainings that we offer in the community to step in and be like, okay, I hear you. Let's talk about it and let's get you connected to help.
Is your organization part of a statewide or even a national network that work together, sharing information and programs?
So when it comes to being in the local mental health authority, every county is connected to a certain local mental health authority. For Denton County, we have our own. Collin County has theirs, Tarrant and Dallas County as well. And then for some of the smaller counties, some of the larger counties might cover them. So we do work together when it comes to task force and different shared interests, especially with crisis. We're working right now on our zero suicide initiative. So that's something that we're definitely partnering with other local mental health authorities to kind of brainstorm and come together. I mean, we all have the same goal to keep the conversation going with mental health, break this stigma and taboo, and offer that hope and services to people who need them.
So how do you get your funding? I mean, how do you do you
That's
grants? Is it through grants? Is it fundraising? All the above?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Denton County HMR specifically, we are a nonprofit, so we are a 501c3. We work some through grants. That's where a portion of our funding does come from. The program that I'm in charge of, we actually is a COVID-19 response grant that we just got. So a lot of our funding does come from applying for grants and being awarded through different federal and public-private agencies.
Okay, how about fundraisers?
We have fundraisers sometimes for sure. A lot of our fundraisers recently have been focused on our LOSS team, which is our local outreach to suicide survivors. Basically, it's a team of mental health professionals and people with lived experience that go to scenes of suicides and offer hope and help and support and resources to the families. COVID, of course, has kind of changed how we respond, but usually that recently our fundraising has kind of been going to that. We have an annual Race for Hope, which is a 5K that we have. We just had that a little bit ago. We did a virtual one. We also have our music fest and art auction that we usually have in the spring. We had to cancel, of course, because of COVID, but those are two of our biggest ones. Then we'll have an upcoming yard sale soon to help kind of continue to build funding for that program specifically.
That's been part of the problem too, is that so many nonprofit organizations, depend on golf outings, fashion shows and things like that to really cover a lot of their expenses and their programs to reach their clients. Mm-hmm. And that's all just been knocked off the planet. Yeah. And so you have to turn to other fundraising methods in order to continue to do that. So again, I will remind our audience that if what we're talking about is something that is important to you, feel free to go onto that website and all. And do you have a donate button on the website?
We do. We have a donate button on the website for sure. Please.
Maybe make a donation just to help them continue the work that they're doing in Denton County. And if you live in any other county, look up your mental health organizations that are in your county and maybe continue to support them also in any way.
We appreciate it.
Yeah. I would also like to get your opinion on medication.
Okay.
I guess I don't what's your feeling on medication? Do you try? Would you rather work with a prosumer? What did you call them?
Prosumer.
Prosumer without medication, if possible, or do you just believe in medication and what it can do in terms of just helping that person kind of move along? I don't know. Do you know kind of what I'm asking?
I do.
And okay. I want to add a follow-up to what Vaughn is saying too. Do you have the ability to prescribe medications, or do your clients then have to go to a medical professional in order to get it?
Yeah.
Those are great questions. We'll start this by saying I am a counselor, so I can't speak specifically on medical stuff, but I can say that speaking on Stuart's question, we have psychiatrists and advanced nurse practitioners within our organization that are able to prescribe mental health medications to somebody if that's something that they're interested in. At the same time, kind of going on Vaughn's question, it is not a requirement of our services to take psychiatric medications. One of my biggest things as a clinician and as a counselor is to meet people where they're at. If they are not open to medication, that's fine. Right. How can we work in therapy and in case management to help decrease some of these symptoms if not taking medication is something that you choose? And my job is to help them work towards their goals.
Okay.
If managing their symptoms without medication is their goal, that's what we're going to work on. But at the same time, I feel it's important for people to still have honest conversations with doctors, so then that way they are completely educated so they can make the best decisions for themselves.
Okay. So really, your organization sees individuals who come with maybe just minor anxiety all the way up to, you said you're not saying suicidal, you're saying what did you,
People who are experiencing suicidal thoughts.
Okay, so suicide. I thought you said another word.
Or suicidality.
That's the word.
There it is.
So you have just a huge range. I mean, you could even maybe have maybe even a woman who is experiencing postpartum depression. I mean, it sounds like you guys are just, from minor to very serious.
Yeah, we're lucky to have multiple departments within our organization that can work with people at varying degrees of their mental health journey. And at the same time, if someone is in crisis, we have an amazing crisis department. I'm a little biased because that's kind of where I've grown up at MHMRs in the crisis department, but an amazing crisis team that can meet with people, meet with their families, and support them through any sort of crisis situation. And then, of course, our intellectual and developmental disabilities side, which is also available. So we're very lucky to have all these services and offer them to people. We also have substance use counselors that are amazing, peer support groups. We have a program for people who are experiencing possibly maybe their first episode of psychosis. So there are so many aspects within our organization that we can help pinpoint people to, which is pretty great.
Is there a certain age group where you see the numbers are a little higher than others, or is it just across the board?
Are you talking just mental health overall?
Yes. In your organization, do you see more cases in adolescents? Do you see more cases in the elderly, or is it just kind of across the board?
I think it's pretty much just across the board. And like I've said kind of over and over again, it's different for every single person. Every single person's mental health journey is going to be different and look different. Well, I mean, we do serve children all the way up to the elderly. So we'll work with anybody that's open to talking to us and hearing us out.
How large a staff do you have?
I believe we have over 300 staff. I think it's about 300, 350, I want to guess.
And that's just within Denton County.
Yeah, so that's within Denton County and both our mental health side of the house and our IDD side of the house, which is the intellectual and developmental disabilities.
Well, I was just thinking of everything that you've been talking about. I was going to think that's an awful lot to strap on so many people. But with 350 people, then you have access to a lot of professionals that can help people from even the most minor of entry level circumstances to those that are a little bit more advanced in the spectrum.
Yeah, we definitely have an amazing team of people in all our departments that work together, and we work in the best interest of the clients for sure.
I have a question for you. I have a friend who actually speaks to a counselor once a week. They have a standing appointment they schedule. But there have been times where she's needed to talk to her counselor, just kind of unexpectedly, something has gone where she's really feeling the anxiety and she can't because the counselor's booked or whatever.
Yeah.
And they've got the standing appointment. Then by the time the appointment comes around, she's feeling better and they still have their conversation. And I know that counselors just can't be 24/7. I get that. But what do you do in that case when this person really needs, I guess I'm kind of thinking an answer to it would be some kind of hotline, but I don't know. But what do you do? How does that person get through that moment alone? What would be your recommendation for that?
So there's a couple options. I know, speaking specifically on my counseling practice, one of my biggest goals is making sure that people have that social support network in place, or at least people who they can call and contact, because you're right, counselors are not going to be available 24/7. You got your 1 week appointment. They try their best to answer phone calls if possible, but they're typically pretty booked, especially right now. Yeah. So developing that support system, developing that group of people they can turn to, but at the same time, having access to hotlines that people can call. I know there's a COVID hotline. I don't know the number offhand, but especially if someone's needing the support, there's always the suicide prevention lifeline as well. That's 1-800-273-8255. And that's available 24/7 as well.
Should we repeat that and put it on the screen, Stuart?
Absolutely. That
Why
would
don't
be
you go ahead
great.
and say that number one more time?
So that's
maybe Mark will get it.
Okay, cool. It is the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. It is 1-800-273-8255.
And that again is just Denton County.
No. So that's the national lifeline number.
Oh, that's
Denton
the
County
national lifeline.
also has our own crisis hotline as well, which we can give that number as well. It's 1-800-762-0157. So anybody experiencing a mental health crisis or just needing some extra support is always more than welcome to call that number as well. So that's two numbers that definitely can provide support outside of the times.
The first number that you gave, you said was a national hotline.
Yes.
So if somebody calls that national hotline and all, do they then hook that person up with their local county? If somebody was to call the national hotline and they're from Denton County, they would get to you. If they were calling from Denver, they would be pointed in that direction.
So the national hotline is kind of a separate entity from us. They, of course, offer resources and support to people regardless of where they live. And I hope they also then give them resources in the local community as well.
Yeah.
But our hotline is available.
I'm not sure if Mark got all those. We'll put them on the screen here, hopefully at the end.
Sounds good. Always good info to have.
We'll try and give those numbers once again.
Absolutely. So the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is going to be 1-800-273-8255. And if you're experiencing any sort of crisis in Denton County, you can call our 24/7 hotline as well at 1-800-762-0157.
Well, the program is recorded, so it will be replayed, and people can go to this program via YouTube and Facebook and all, so they can go back and find that information, or just contact you directly and get that information.
Yeah, and I definitely encourage people to put that number in their phones, both numbers as well, if you live in Denton County or know people in Denton County, because when those crisis situations come up, sometimes they're very unexpected. So having that number that you can give out to people and help support them and getting connected with those numbers is a vital piece of the puzzle.
And again, because of what COVID-19 is doing to all of us mentally, it's a good idea to, as I said at the beginning of the show, stay in touch with people.
Yes.
Call them. How you doing? Get on a Zoom. Even if you're having dinner, say, how about I get you on Zoom and you put your plate in front of you and I'll put mine in front of you. We'll have dinner together.
Yeah, I've had a sushi date before. It was pretty fun.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah.
You got to get creative.
Great idea. Great idea.
Well, I just am very thankful for people like you and organizations like yours, because I know that mental health is a very real thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really out there. I mean, honestly, I can probably say that I know a half a dozen people right now who are experiencing, mostly anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Just the anxiety that's kind of coming from what's going on in today's times. But I have other friends who are just dealing with sometimes life's punches and,
right.
A divorce or whatever, and they're struggling.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think this is such an important thing to put out there. And I, again, am just the fact that you are not only just putting it out there, but that you're trying to even go that extra step and train the community on how to recognize and support these individuals is amazing to me. I applaud your efforts.
Well, thank you.
Lauren, on behalf of us and also our audience that's watching, thank you for taking the time to share what you do and make us a little more aware of mental health concerns and these issues that we have to live with. That'll do it for another edition of Something to Talk About. Again, want to just remind all of you, starting next week, we will be joining you on Wednesdays at 11 o'clock, not on Fridays anymore. So I hope you will see you next Wednesday. And again, thank you to Lauren, thank you to Vaughn, and thanks to all of you for spending the time with us. Go out and make it a great day. And thanks for watching Something to Talk About.
Thank you so much, Lauren.
Absolutely. Thank
Stuart.
you.
Y'all have a
Bye-bye.
great day. Stay positive.
You too.